Hey folks, this is Spectre, Tesla Spectre. Today I will do a really quite in-depth consumption analysis of my Tesla Model 3 long range, which I drove now throughout the winter on 18-inch aero discs with winter tires, but without these plastic, hubs, which are supposed to improve the consumption. And let's see how it performed overall. So as you can see, I already spent 7,882 kilometers between 3rd of December and 3rd of April, so within 4 months. And actually, over this time, I had an average consumption of 176 watt hours per kilometer. There is a difference you see between the kilometers for which this average has been calculated and the overall odometer. That's because after a couple of hundred kilometers, we had to do a hard reset because of some software update that had to be done in the Tesla Center. But the consumption is basically unfazed by that. This also means a factual real-world range in winter of 426 kilometers. Although we did not have an extremely cold winter, we had a wet and snowy, rainy winter. We had temperatures between, well, the maximum I think was -12 or something, so not really cold, and up to 5-6 degrees, but the average was around -2, -1, something like that over the months. And considering all that, and also as you will see later, considering the huge amount of highway travel which I conducted over these months, I have to say, first of all, the general average consumption is pretty amazing. But now let's break it down and have a look at the different aspects. Let's start by having a look at the share of the different types of roads in the overall use and the kilometers. So within these 7,882 kilometers, we had 3,518 or 45% on highway, only 1,213 or 15% on country roads, and about 3,151 or 40% in the city. That of course matters then when we look at how this overall consumption of 167 is just composed of the 3 different areas. First, we have, of course, for city and country speed limits, 50 kilometers for the city and 90 for country roads, and I go maximum 3 kilometers above that, so 53 would be the absolute maximum speed in any city limit, and 93 on a country road, usually below. And as you can see here on the country roads, one could even achieve more or less this average, came to about 86 kilometers per hour. Whereas on the city roads, it was just about 41. And we see then we have a consumption for the city of 154, and for the country roads of 168 watt hours per kilometer, which is both to me not extraordinarily fantastic, just okay. But as I say, considering the winter conditions, it's acceptable. However, what is truly interesting to me is how the car performs at different speeds on the highway. And here we can learn a couple of things. First of all, I used different maximum speeds over the time, and I also recorded how many of the trips I used like that, and then knowing how long these distances were, I could calculate how much share they have in the overall consumption. So I drove about 30% of the time at a maximum of 110 kilometers, 50% at a maximum of 120, and 20% only at a maximum of 130. I did not go over 130, normally 2 exceptions for a few minutes in Germany on 150, and also once up to 200. but really like few kilometers, that really doesn't matter. But what one can see here is, first of all, that the difference between the maximum speed you try to achieve and the actual average speed that you manage to achieve is getting worse with the higher speeds. So if I set the car at a maximum speed of 110 kilometers on a highway, I managed to achieve a real average speed of 104, which is 94% of the maximum speed. If I went to 120 kilometers, I achieved an average of exactly 110 kilometers per hour, which translates into 91.6, 92% of the maximum speed. But if I went to the absolutely also legally possible maximum when the tachometer shows me 133 kilometers per hour, I actually only achieved an average of 116 kilometers per hour, or that is 88.9 or 89% of the aspired maximum speed, which means this already gets less and less efficient the faster one wants to drive. And the reason is very simple, because one is not alone on the street. So you usually have trucks, or even when you go on weekends, on Sundays, for example, you have other cars who go slower. In the Czech Republic, many people drive 100 or 110. So particularly 110 is a quite, I would say, popular speed. And that means the quicker you drive, the more likely it is that you just meet other slower cars. And if they then overtake each other, you just simply have to slow down quite a bit. And on longer trips, for example, to Berlin and then even to Poland, it became much more visible that the higher speeds were not really efficient in terms of gaining any time. They were even a lot less efficient in terms of saving energy, obviously, because 110, and here we have to say that's winter roads, yeah, that was lots of snow and rain, meant a consumption of 173, which is not really that much more than what I consumed anyway on country roads. But as you know, on these country roads, you've seen also I came very close to the possible maximum speed anyway. So that explains why I would say also the consumption is pretty similar. It jumps then to nearly 200 if I go 120, and it jumps up to 235 when I go 130. So whereas the gain in speed is really minimal, the gain in consumption is not minimal. To quantify it correctly, whereas the time gained between 110 and 120 was a mere 3%, the car consumed 15% more energy. And when you go at the maximum speed, the time gained was a meager 5 point some percent on the distance, but the consumption went up by about 35%. And that is just showing that going quicker is factually around 7 times less efficient than going slower. And it's not only less efficient in terms of energy consumption, it's less efficient if you relate time gained versus energy spent. So if there is any argument for speed limits, this is it. Now, I often saw consumption which was a lot higher on average over winter than what I've seen. So I asked myself, why is it that I have this kind of really low consumption? And I think there are basically 3 key aspects to it. Aspect 1 is driving with foresight. I drive the car pretty much the same way I drove my diesel before, which I managed. It was a Mercedes C220 diesel, and I managed to drive that over 80,000 kilometers at 6 liters flat average. And I mainly did that by looking forward and already, slowing down when it was possible, trying to keep a distance, to keep a car rolling rather than stop and go. And even though you have regen on a Tesla and it's very strong regen, energy that you consumed at one point, you never get back 100%, however good the regen might be. So that's for me, one of the key things. Do not waste energy unnecessarily because you won't get it back. So that's number one. But the second aspect is probably equally important, and that is, how do I set my HVAC? So in winter, the heating. Now, the first thing is, I always find it completely ridiculous when people drive in a car, sitting there in a t-shirt at 22, 23 degrees when it's outside -5 or -10 or even 0. That is just ecologically stupid. And to wear a sweater, first of all, hurts nobody and is a clever setting. But the second thing is also, I really hate to have a hot head when I'm driving. So the way I set it up, which works perfectly for me, is the room temperature is at a crisp 18.5 degrees. I checked that out. 18 was too cold for me. 19 was already getting too warm for my head. So 18.5 is excellent for the thinking, for the head. But I combine that with seat heating at level 1. I don't need more. And I combine it with the steering wheel always on heating when I drive. And the heated steering wheel provides me with warm hands. The nicely warm seat gives me a nice warm bum and a good feeling in sitting. And I have a fresh and alert head, which is not drowned in overheated air in the car. That, to me, is first of all a very convenient setting, but secondly, it is also a setting which ensures that I consume extremely little on the HVAC, because the seat heating and the heated steering wheel consumes close to nothing. And then on top of all of that comes the third point, and that is, I have a Tesla to also have fun, okay? Yes, I have fun in two ways. One way, and that's the 90% part of it, is I simply totally love to drive the car efficiently without, feeling like a turtle on the road. So that's the 90% part, which is kind of fun with rationality. And then this car has 460 horsepower, 0 to 100 in 4.5. Goodness me, I also want to experience that sometimes. So what I do for that is also very simple. I just simply use it on country roads, sometimes short bursts on a highway when there's place for it, opportunity for it. So I do have my fun with the car, but I also learn to have fun with being ecological and efficient, because let's face it, folks, having an EV does not mean you can now burn all the energy. And when I've seen videos where, an Audi e-tron consumes 360 watt hours per kilometer when driving only 90 or 110 or something, then that is just a perversion of the idea of electric cars, because it's also about being ecologically concerned. So those are just my tips, but I also want to share with you some calculations on the costs. So overall, I had 1228 kilowatt hours, which cost me overall 5,772 Czech crowns, or 230.88 euros. And that is split between 25% on superchargers, where I paid about 128.2 euros on the longer trips. Then practically nothing paid to providers here in the Czech Republic usually, like ČEZ or Pre, which cost me some 6 euros or so. And then home charging, which I get at a rate of 4 Czech crowns, so like 16 cents per kilowatt hour, which comes up to 9 to 6. But I also have a quarter of all my consumption entirely for free. because when I'm in Prague, for example, I practically never ever pay anything, because here are so many for free charging options in the malls and everywhere that I make use of that, of course. And just for comparison, the Mercedes C220 diesel, which I drove until December last year, and which was really super efficient, needed 6 liters of diesel, and that's, if we look at the prices right now and across the time that we had there, it's around, let's say, 48 Czech crowns per liter. For that distance covered so far would translate into roughly 22,700 Czech crowns or 908 euros. And, with a Nat's whisker, that is approximately 7 times as expensive as it was to drive the Tesla. So that's it for now. And as always, I would totally love to get a like, of course. And if you then subscribe and follow me even further, that's even so much cooler. And you can also check out my other videos. I just did one on a really nice trip to Austria, where you can also see some GoPro videos from the skiing slopes. And I had a not so nice but very interesting encounter with a deer, and you could check out how much damage that really did to the car, and how that accident occurred, because it was on camera. Take care, folks. Be careful and enjoy life. And if you have a Tesla, enjoy the Tesla.